Hello, everyone. So, welcome to week 7. So, within week 7, we're going to go ahead and start talking about the metric system. So, the metric system is obviously super important, especially for those who work within the healthcare system, since that is the unit system that the healthcare system follows, and to be honest, the rest of the world besides the United States. And so, we're going to be talking about it. So we're going to kind of just get used to it and how certain formattings of the metric system look like, and then from there the big plan, the grand scheme of things, we're going to be talking about conversion amongst units, since for example, there are specific measurements that you want to use for certain things. So if you're talking about how far someone drove, you don't really want to talk about a meter. That's just not the appropriate unit of measure. That is where a kilometer would come in and stuff like that. So of course, then we're going to be talking about how to go ahead and convert amongst those units. Okay, so excuse me, the metric system, the whole name of the game, and also called the SI units. So that is the most commonly used system of measurement in the healthcare system. So again, that's something that, especially for those who are already working within some sort of health facility, you're probably already attuned to it a bit and stuff like that. And again, throughout life, yet again, this is a more real world application, and kind of just growing up and stuff like that. There are things that we're more familiar about, like liter, or meter, grams, and stuff like that. So hopefully it's not too new. And if it is, that's okay too. Okay, so let's talk about the basic units of measurement. So we have length, weight, and volume. Those are the 3 basic units of measurement. And we will talk about them more in depth, but now we're just going to go ahead and again dip our toes in, get a little bit settled with it. And here we can see are the units for these 3 basic measurements. So for length, that is where we talk about some sort of scale of a meter. For weight, we talk some sort of scale of a gram, so a decagram, kilogram. Kilogram is another one of those cases that we're kind of just like in everyday life more used to. And then liter. And then, of course, we have some abbreviations. So I will say, please be cautious with some of the abbreviations, especially when it comes kind of to the letter M. Just because as we'll go in with different abbreviations and we talk about different scales of the different basic units, more than just meter, gram, liter, when we start talking about hectogram, decameter, all that stuff, please just be cautious, because again, some of them, especially like how I said the letter M, are used quite often, but again, there are different abbreviations for different units of measurement. So just be cautious. And again, the way that they are written are the way that you want to go ahead and adapt to them. So notice this is a capital L, but the other ones are in lowercase format. And we'll go ahead and point out some of the other cases from as we continue. Okay. Oh my gosh. Sorry. This is like the first time I've actually put a water bottle next to me while lecturing, so you don't have to hear a disgusting cough or clearing of throat. Okay, so similar to the decimal system, the metric system is based on multiples of 10. So what do I mean by that? So you'll notice, again, all of these units of measurement, they're in some, excuse me, multiple of 10. That is what the system is based off of. And again, you'll see it in decimal format. So if you need any, remembrance of decimals, go ahead and just check out, I believe, we talked about decimals in week 4. So I think week 4, yeah. And so go ahead and just brush up on decimals if you need to. But again, that's the super nice part. So when it comes to the metric system, we won't necessarily be seeing fractions. We'll be talking about decimals when it comes to these different units of measurement. And again, you can go ahead and check out table 4.2 to see the rest of the prefixes that they use for the metric system. So you'll see, again, we're not always just going to be talking about meter, gram, liter, because again, think about it like how I mentioned, in some cases, you're not going to measure a highway with a meter stick. that is where you're going to go ahead and put it in reference of kilometers. That is the more appropriate unit of measurement, because now we're looking at something on a more grander level, something bigger. So we're going to look at some multiple of 10 of a meter. And again, the same thing can be said if you're measuring a penny, or something even smaller than that. Maybe you don't need a whole meter stick. That is where maybe a centimeter and a millimeter will come in. So these are the different prefixes. And notice these prefixes also have their own abbreviation. I will mention there are much more how do I refer to this? Like different units of measurement, different prefixes out there. I will only be referring to the one in the textbook. So the textbook, please go ahead and look at that chart in this chapter, within chapter 7. So please go ahead and go look at that. So whatever is within the textbook, that is what I'm going to be sticking to. I will not go outside of that, because again, there are more in-depth prefixes, but whatever's in the textbook will suffice. And again, this is just a little preview of what will be within it. So we have kilo, centi, milli, micro, and then we'll talk about eventually. We'll be talking about conversions for quite a minute. So we'll be talking about, deca, what else is there? Currently hecto and stuff like that. Currently nothing else is coming to my head right now. Deci, that's what the one I was thinking about. And so on and so forth. But again, notice these are just multiples of 10. So the bigger the prefixes, the bigger the amount is. Obviously, the higher the multiple of 10 will be. And again, something like a micro, let's say a micrometer, a microgram, or a microliter, that's something incredibly small. So if you can see here, 0.0000001, that's 1/millionth of something. So again, notice how small that is, but it is sometimes needed for something that is measured on such a small scale. Okay. So let's talk about how to go ahead and just write these units out. How do I go ahead and use the correct metric notation? So if the quantity is less than 1, include the 0 before the decimal point and make sure to delete any unnecessary zeros. So remember, sometimes it can get a little bit confusing what is a necessary 0 and what is an unnecessary 0. So for example, if I have 0.01, this is a necessary 0 because 0.01 is not the same as 0.1. These are two different numbers. This 0.01, this 0 is an actual placeholder needed to go ahead and represent the value of this number. But let's say we have 0.010. Well, this 0 is not really changing the number at all compared to this 0. So the last 0 here on the right-hand side, that is what we will refer to as an unnecessary 0. It's not changing the value of the number, because we could put an infinite amount of zeros and it wouldn't change the number at all, because again, these aren't holding any place to this number here and impacting the value at any sort. So we want to make sure to delete any unnecessary zeros and include a space between the quantity and a unit. And then lastly, use the decimal system. So again, eventually in a few chapters, we'll talk about the apothecary system. It is a dated system that will kind of just go ahead and refresh. And you'll see that we will use fractions there, but again, just always remember the metric system does follow a decimal system. So these values will be written with decimals. Okay, let's talk about now the select. So we want to select the correct metric notation. So what if we have 7/10 of a millimeter? So notice there are two parts of this answer. There's a numerical value, so how much of something we have. In this case, it's 7/10. And then we have what we're referring to, what unit of measurement. I remember a long time ago when I was in a chemistry class, my professor, my freshman or sophomore year, I can't remember, of college, she was always, a stickler, especially a class like chemistry, on units. And that's something that, eventually with you guys, as you continue throughout the nursing program, you want to make sure you're always looking out for your units when need be, because she would always say a number is nothing without its unit. So, here we're talking about 7/10, but it could be 7/10 of anything. Well, 7/10 of a millimeter specifically. So again, there will be two parts to this answer. So from that point on, let's go ahead and first worry about the 7/10. So remember, this will be using a decimal system. So we want to talk, well, what is 7/10? Notice, well, since it has tenths, we will be looking at a number less than 1, because remember, whenever we have that TH, that is now indicating that we're talking about values less than 1, place values less than 1. And remember how it goes. So we have the decimal point, we have the tenths position, the hundredths, thousandths, and so on and so forth. So what 7/10 is implying that in the tenths position, in the tenths place value, there should be a 7. So numerically, this will be represented as 0.7. But 0.7 what? And again, it has to be represented as a decimal. Of course, 7/10 you could represent as a fraction, but since we're specifically talking about the metric system, we have to remember that the metric system follows the decimal system. So 0.7 what? Well, that is where we have to make sure we have the appropriate abbreviation for a milliliter. So we know liter as an abbreviation we talked about was a capital L. Well, milli is used as a lowercase m. So here we can see, make sure to include the space, ml. And again, it has to be capital L cents. That is how we abbreviate liter. So here we can see ml. Okay. And again, don't forget about that space. So we see in our next example, 125 micrograms. So notice this is a value greater than 1. So 125, that is just a 1, 2, 5. And here we can see microgram. Well, what was a microgram? Well, microgram is abbreviated as MC, and gram is abbreviated as a G. So here we can see it will be 125 space MCG. And last but not least, 4/100ths of a gram. So again, what this is indicating is we have a decimal less than 1. We have a number less than 1 since we see the hundredths is used. But we have to be cautious, because what does 4/100ths look like? Well, if I have 0.4, that's 4/10 of something. So what this is implying is you have to make sure that this 4 is in the hundredths place value. So remember, it goes 0.10 hundredths. So that means in order to make sure that we're representing 4/100ths, we need a necessary 0 here to point out that that 4 is in the hundredths place value. Oh, sorry, my dog is snoring. It scared the life out of me. So here we can see 0. Sorry. Oh, he's dreaming. I don't know if you guys hear. And gram is just a G. Don't forget about that space. And that is it. I wonder if you guys hear him dreaming. Okay, stay tuned for the second video.